All right, we'll start off with the airbox. We have a 5/16 there, and then one over on this side that goes directly onto the throttle body. And we can just wiggle this thing off. Okay, then there's gonna be this hose right here. The hose clamp on mine is already loose. Somebody's been in here before, obviously. But that's what the clamp looks like for the throttle body. It's got a little extension on it, which is nice. Can toss that off to the side, and then we'll go around and move some of these wires here. I'll go ahead and remove some of this stuff just so you can see a little bit easier. But you don't have to remove the airbox. All right, so we have a plastic connection right here that we'll need to pry up on to get that out of the way. You can use a pry tool, or you can just yank on it, honestly. Go ahead and remove the connector for the ignition coil. Really don't have to remove that. You can just loosen it and set it out of the way. All right, went ahead and sprayed this thing off with some compressed air, and now we can take a look inside and get down to what we're really looking for. Even though they do label this engine as OTE, I don't trust anybody. So we are gonna go ahead and open it up and see if in fact it is OTE. So you can just give this thing a couple good whacks here and there. It's a lot better than prying on it. Yeah, and just pull up and wiggle on it. Little bit of buildup, but not too bad, to be honest. I've seen way, way worse. Now we can take a good peek down inside here. See if I see any really bad stuff right off the bat. And I don't see anything too awful, except a whole lot of chain slack. Man, that is bad. So I don't know if you can quite see. Let me zoom in there. So check this out. This is our rattling noise. That should be extremely tight and not movable at all. I am really kind of blown away that this thing hasn't skipped time. That's just wild. Feels like our guide is still there though, which is impressive. So maybe this tensioner just recently failed, which would be great. Okay, I'm gonna try really hard to show you guys the tensioner. It is not a difficult job, and it's not difficult to see in person, but it is gonna be kind of hard to get on video. So right back here on the back of the cylinder head on the passenger side, there's a 32 millimeter nut, it looks like right there. It's that rusty thing right down there. It's also the same as 1 1/4 inch if I remember, and that's the tensioner. So all you have to do to remove it is get a socket on it, and then right back there, see that piece of that chain underneath this gear? So it's pushing up on a chain guide right there. And that is what our culprit is. So really it's just as easy as setting this to top dead center and removing the tensioner, reinstalling it, and then giving it a smack to release it. It really is as easy as it sounds, as long as all of your chain guides are not destroyed. So your chain guides, this top one here, you can see there's a metal bracket, and then it has a piece of plastic clipped onto it. That's your top guide or deflector. And then there are a few more. We have one on this side here that you can't see just because the camera can't pick it up. But anyway, there's one down in this little section right here that you can take a look at. It's going to be hard to test those without pulling the timing cover off, but more often than not, you can just replace the tensioner itself. So we're going to have to put this thing at top dead center, which I'll show you guys, and then I like to put a few zip ties between the timing gear and the chain to keep everything from moving. Then we'll just yank out that tensioner and swap it out. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and set this thing at top dead center. There are 3 marks that you will traditionally look at when setting your Ecotec to TDC. The bottom one we're not gonna get to because obviously we're trying to get away with just replacing the tensioner. So we're not gonna pull that apart. But the top 2 that we'll be able to see are an intake and an exhaust pointer. And they're gonna be on the cam gears right here. So this says INT, and then it has a little line. We're just going to turn these things until they are at about 10 and 2, and that should be TDC. So this one right here, I know it's going to be hard to see, but it says INT, and then it has a little line, and then over here on the other cam, we have EXH and a line right there. A few other ways you can make sure you're on the TDC stroke is the piston needs to be at the top. So you could pull out spark plug number 1, make sure piston is up top. We'll go ahead and pull the spark plug out. Just make sure it's at top dead center to be redundant. And then another thing that you can do is take a look at each cam lobe. And as long as the cam lobes are not actuating the followers, then you know that they are not open. So that would also confirm TDC. Next thing we're gonna do is take a few zip ties, and we're just gonna zip tie the chain to the gear. You really don't have to do this, but it also doesn't hurt. And this is an important thing just in case you don't have your engine perfectly at TDC, or in case your engine is kind of worn. This will keep it from moving around whenever you remove the tensioner and stuff like that. So yeah, perfect, there we go. And I would recommend not clipping these. There's no reason to clip those off. They'll just fall down in the engine if you have bad luck. We'll put a link down below to the updated timing chain tensioner. There is an updated version that you want to use. You don't want to use the old style, and you definitely don't want to use a cheap garbage one. I will also say this car had a couple check engine codes, and the previous owner bought a few random things, mass airflow sensor, and I think a crank sensor, crankshaft position sensor. And I think they did that because maybe one of the codes on this engine are for a timing correlation issue. And that very well could be because of how freaking loose this timing chain was. Well, the parts came in that we needed to finish this timing chain tensioner job. And that was the tensioner itself, as well as a valve cover gasket set. So this is pretty self-explanatory. We've got our spark plug tube seals, all of the new hardware grommets, and then the gasket itself. I'll put a link in the description to both pieces. This is the important one though. Don't cheap out and get a garbage timing chain tensioner. You want to get the Gen 3 from Cloy's. So this one right here is the latest generation of the tensioner. It's what's called a one piece, even though there's multiple pieces obviously, but that's because it doesn't come apart. The factory piece will come apart. This stuff will actually come out and you'll have to retrieve it from inside the engine. The second generation I think did the same thing. This third one, it's all together and there's not an O-ring. It actually has a bigger boss right here instead of an O-ring. So anyway, this is the one that you want. You want it to look like that, have a little bump on top too. The factory one is just flat. So let's take a look in there. I put the valve cover back on just so we wouldn't get crud in there. All right, and you see that rusty thing right there? That is the top of the timing chain tensioner. It has no bump on it, so it is original to the vehicle. This is going to be a 32 millimeter, which is also the same as an 1.25 inch, which is also the same as the oil filter cap. So if you already have a socket for that, then you'll be able to do this job. If not, you'll need to order one of these. I suggest getting a stubby one. Just fits into more places and it fits on that cap. If you get a tall one, sometimes it can hit the intake manifold. That way you're not wasting money and you get dual use out of your socket here. So we're gonna loosen this thing up. I'll take the valve cover back off so we can see a little bit down inside there, and then I'll show you how to activate the tensioner. The tensioner is going to come deactivated or disabled, whatever you want to call it. This piece is going to move all around. So outward is activated or enabled. You do not want to install it like that. You need to install it with this piece flopping around. And as you tighten it, this little channel right here is going to grab the chain guide and perfectly align itself, and the body will be able to turn independently of this piece. Let me see if I can show you that. See, I can spin it, it's just fine. And then once we have everything set up, I'll show you how to activate it. Okay, we've got our socket and breaker bar on there. Let's see how tight this thing is. Shouldn't be too bad. Yeah, there we go. Already got it broke loose. This is where having that short socket comes in handy. If you had a deep one, you'd be hitting the firewall with the ratchet handle. Oh, there we go. So we should get this thing out in multiple pieces, unfortunately. Yeah, there we go. So we've got the main body out, and then we have the tensioner piece itself. I'm probably gonna have to get a magnetic grabber to fish the rest of that out of there. Let me get a rag underneath here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so, all right, so you can look in there at least a little bit. Kind of see what's going on. I'm gonna see if I can get a magnetic tool in there to get the rest of that tensioner out. Okay, I was able to pull it out with needle nose pliers instead. I couldn't find a magnet that was the right size. All right, we can go ahead and get the new one installed. We don't need to put any kind of gasket maker or anything like that on it. Just gonna slide it in there and screw it in. So just go slow with this, and the little divot or trough in there will align with the tensioner, the plastic chain tensioner, and then we can torque it. So this is going to torque to 55 foot-pounds. So let's do that real quick. Okay, click, click, there's 55 foot-pounds. Now we can pull the valve cover back off and finish up inside there. This is going to be kind of difficult for me to video for you guys, but I'm going to try to do my best to illustrate what we have to do. So down inside here, if you'll look where I'm pointing right there, we can see the timing chain. So right behind that is the timing chain tensioner guide. It's plastic. I don't know if I'll be able to give you guys a good view of it. Okay, there we go. We can see a little bit of that kind of orange color showing through the links. So right here, where the tip of my zip tie is pointing, you're gonna wanna put something on there, preferably plastic if you can, and then you're gonna tap the back of it with a hammer. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna push the tensioner back in and release the safety clip. Then it's gonna spring out, and from then on you're gonna have timing chain tension. So before, this chain was flopping all over the place. It should be pretty easy to see if the timing chain tensioner has released. So I'm going to use this right here. You can use the end of a crescent wrench or something like that. Pretty much something that will reach where you need it to, and it's not pointy because you don't want to damage the chain. So I'm just going to hit this with a hammer, and that should do it. Okay, there we go. That should be it. I did feel the tensioner push back whenever I hit it. So the first little light tap didn't do it, but after that it definitely went. So at this point, once you're sure that your timing chain tensioner is activated or released, then you can go ahead and cut your zip ties off the sprockets here, and then you can rotate the engine over just to make sure you got rid of all the floppy flop. All right, I went ahead and cleaned up my valve cover. It was pretty nasty. I really didn't want to. Once I started, there's a lot of carbon inside this thing, in the PCV system, really. So this right here, this top piece, is actually a baffle, and it's riveted on. You can't take it off. So I just use like 3 cans of brake cleaner all inside these 6 holes, this front hole, the slit right up here, and then there's 2 little vent pieces where the oil cap is, and it took forever. Cleaned all that crap out and used some compressed air. So next up, we've got to remove the old grommets from our hardware, and this is kind of a pain. Honestly, you can probably reuse your grommets. These are going to be a lot more pliable in my experience than the valve cover gaskets themselves. The valve cover gaskets, I mean, on these things, sometimes they just break apart like they're made of hard candy. Definitely not reusable. But these grommets are not too difficult, just a kind of a little bit of a pain. So you'll need to take every single one off of the hardware pieces, but you're not gonna put the new grommets on the hardware. You're actually gonna put the new grommets in the valve cover. So you'll just kind of push it in and it'll snap in place, and then you'll stick your hardware in each grommet. You may want to put a little bit of oil on them. It just depends on how stiff yours are. As you can see, that wasn't too hard. I was able to push that one through. All right, now we just got to drop this valve cover back down. There is a torque spec, I think, but don't tell your parents. You don't have to follow it on this specific case to the T, because the hardware for the valve cover on the bottom of each of these little bolts is a stopper. So you can sort of just zip this thing down on a 1/4 inch impact on setting number 2. And so that's going to be my torque spec in this case. And pretty much all the hardware that uses a grommet of this style and has a little stopper on the bottom of the washer is pretty much the same. So just going to make sure we start everything by hand, because we don't want to be, you know, we can be goobers, but we don't want to be all the way goobers and strip this thing out. So, all right, we got to run number dos. We'll just slowly sink these around, and then once they all kind of get close enough, then we'll give them the ugga dugga. Okay, so there's that. You know what? I lost my oil cap. Okay, there it is. Stick the oil cap on there so crud doesn't get well, any more crud than we already have down there. Now we just got to pop our number 1 spark plug back in that we pulled out earlier in the job to make sure we were at top dead center. And then we just have to put back the other brackets. We have our fuel line bracket over here, plus this ground. Don't forget to put that back on. Then we'll connect this evap hose and everything else. Put our intake back on, and we can start this thing up and see if it still makes all kinds of awful noise.